Vicky Linane and welcome to Embrace Therapy podcast. I am a practicing art therapist based in Ireland. In each episode, I will interview guests from various fields of therapy and well-being with the aim to encourage healing through embracing therapy. This week's guest on the podcast is Fran Burns. She is a dance movement psychotherapist and qualified teacher of Kung Nhai relaxation. Fran also brings her experience as a physiotherapist and a child psychotherapist to her dance movement practice. So here I am talking to Fran Burns. I hope you enjoy this podcast.
Well, dance movement psychotherapy, basically it started off as dance movement therapy, and it started in the US in the late 1950s, early 60s. And what happened was that there were different women dancers on the West Coast and on the East Coast that were doing different things that turned out to be therapeutic with dance. Basically, one woman was teaching dance, Marion Chase, and she noticed that some women came to her class and kept coming back, but they weren't good dancers at all, but they seemed to really get something from it. And then one of these women happened to speak with her psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist contacted Marion and said, whatever you're doing, it's really helpful. Would you like to come into our psychiatric unit and do some work? So she started off in the back wards of the psychiatric hospitals in the early 1950s or mid 1950s. I'm not sure of the exact date, but it was with people, this was before antipsychotic drugs, and it was with people who had shell shock after the war and people with really significant mental health problems. But she used rhythm and synchrony and group movement, and she was, an exceptional woman. And people, it really helped them. Obviously, it didn't cure necessarily, but it really made a difference in their lives. So that was the beginning of one branch of dance movement therapy. And that branch was really the branch of dance therapy, which continues today, but lasted for a very long time, was that sense of dance therapy as something that you could use with people who had significant mental health and, issues in psychiatric settings. So that's one aspect of dance therapy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the sort of worried well, if you like, Mary Whitehouse was a dancer who started to explore the limits of dance with women in her studio, but she was also interested in and underwent Jungian analysis. And at the time, Jung was working with active imagination. So she began to use active imagination in movement. So that was this, which in later years, then one of her last pupils was Janet Adler. And I actually studied with Janet, so Janet worked with Mary just before Mary stopped working, because Mary got MS, so she had to stop working in the late 70s, early 80s. So Janet worked with her extensively, and then Janet changed the name to Authentic Movement. So so authentic movement is something, basically, it's where the person moves and has a witness to the movement. The movement happens in a contained space, and one person witnesses the movement, the other person moves, and then there's also talk, but not talk about, but a talk as speaking from the movement. So it's bringing the unconscious to consciousness, Whereas on the other aspect, you know, with working in the mental health situation, you're not really wanting to go into the unconscious because generally people are flooded by the unconscious. So you have the two ends of the spectrum, and then there are other people in between who met, you know. Trudy Shoup was another woman who worked in psychiatric hospital, but also worked with regular folks. So a lot of different areas. So that's a kind of a historical view of dance therapy, but it started in the US in that way. I mean, obviously with roots in Europe, in the sense of, you know, many of those women, or a number of them, had worked with Wigman and, you know, different people in different dancers in Europe as well. So
lovely. It's really interesting to find that, you know, the starting points of it and the differences in the starting points of it, but you know, it's been going on for so long. You know, it's quite an old practice, really, when you think about it. Yeah.
Yes, in that sense it is. But interestingly, I mean, it stayed small. I think that's partly because it's been almost entirely female profession, and the fact that it's female, and this is not against at all, but it's the reality of where money goes, that it's female and that it worked primarily with mental health. So both areas are in the unconscious, if you like, of the general, had been in the unconscious of the general population. And so it stayed small. There was the American Dance Therapy Association, and in more recent years, they've gotten money for working with older people and, you know, different things like that. And I think it's more vibrant at the moment. I did train in the US, so I was in that association for a number of years, but I'm no longer in it as I'm back here a long time. But yeah.
Tell me more about the time with Janet. I'm fascinated to know that you actually got to have the training with her directly, and she's, you know, one of the 4 founders of it, really. Like, you know, she learned from the nature of such. So I'd love to know more. Yeah.
Yes, no, it was lovely. I mean, I suppose it was really a matter of timing. I was studying dance therapy in Northern California, in Hayward, and a number of the teachers there actually were training with Janet, and so she had a number of different groups, you know, sort of training groups. They were in the primary one, I was in the next one down, or the third one down, or something, you know. So so that's how it happened. You know, at that point, she was doing a lot of that kind of work. Mm-hmm. And we would go to her studio. She had a studio up near Bodega, and we would go up there and we would stay for 4 or 5 days or something, a few times a year, you know. So there were about 19 or 20 people in the group, and so wow. It was a very, very, very good experience. It was a very helpful experience. It was, you know, supportive. I find supportive of overall my work with dance therapy. You know, it's not just the actual form itself, but it informs. It informs the work, basically, because it's a way of being with your client, with your, you know, with your patient, you know. So it gives you a form for holding that space. So I suppose that's one of the primary things that I have found with it, and also it's very developmental, you know. So
yeah, it's the whole self meeting another person's whole self, and I think that's so beautiful, because in so many different areas of the work, in psychotherapy especially, it isn't whole self. It's a compartment that you might see, you know, whether it be the talk therapy, it's just a small part of you, you know. The body and the mind connection is just, it's so important, you know, and you get to meet someone at that level from the get-go.
Yes, exactly, yes. And I think the wonderful thing about authentic movement, but also the challenge of it, is that you're you have to let go and allow the movement to happen, and that takes a while. It takes a while. It's like you can't do it right away. Nobody can. So it's a process. It's a kind of process.
It sounds like learning to swim or something. Do you know, like you need
Yes.
to take the time to learn the techniques of it,
Yeah.
before you can like learn to float essentially. Yeah. Let the
Flow.
flow come.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing, I suppose, just to say, the last thing, not last thing, but another important piece of authentic movement, I described individual work there, where you have the mover and the witness, is what they would say, or the therapist and the mover, but then also there's group work. And group work is a significant part of authentic movement, because a lot of things happen when people move in a group.
Yeah, the group dynamic is huge. I love working in groups. It's my favorite thing
Yeah.
to do. But do you find that there's a lot of mirroring happening, or do you find that people might be opposite as well, like the opposition? Is it kind of a play on both?
Well, you see, the interesting thing about authentic movement is you can't, in a way, you have to do some individual work first to almost set a boundary. It's not like a boundary where you say, oh, this stops here and that stops there, but the person needs to feel the boundaries of their own body, and needs to feel what's safe and what's not safe in them, and they need to feel comfortable with the form before they move into a group. Because in authentic movement, people move with their eyes closed.
Mm-hmm.
So and when you're moving in a group, you have to have a circle of witnesses. Well, you can have one witness, but that's quite hard. They need to be really know their stuff. But you need to have at least a few people to hold the circle, so that so the space is safe. So people are moving with their eyes closed, unless they move fast or sudden or something like that. Then they're asked to open their eyes in case that they bump into somebody. But the piece about moving with your eyes closed is that that's really allowing the unconscious. And so then in terms of group, it's fascinating who might end up rolling over towards somebody or meeting somebody, or, all of those things. And you don't know who it is if you're staying in that frame.
That is gorgeous. I had no idea that the eyes would be closed. It just makes it so much more sensory, I suppose, as well. Like, and the amount of trust then that you have, like, and put on the witnesses. It's it's a vulnerable place, but it takes courage, and I'm sure a lot
Yes.
is given back then. It's lovely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just to say, and because of that, and that's one of the things about working with Janice, was that she held a very firm container, if you know what I mean by container, both in the space and the time and the kind of rules, so that it could be safe. So it was very important that everybody understood those and followed those, so then it could be safe.
So kind of the ground rules were well established before.
Exactly, because otherwise it does sound like, oh my God.
Yeah. But it sounds gorgeous, something that I would love to experience myself. It's beautiful. So you were in California, and you had your training for more than 3 years, and
Yes, yeah.
And then what happened between you being there and coming back to Ireland? What changed? And I'd love to know a little bit more about coming home, I suppose.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, well, I guess after I trained, I worked in California. I worked in a psychiatric hospital for 3+ years. And then I decided that needed to have a little bit more understanding of sort of, I guess, psychotherapy in a way. And there was part of the training, an extra training I could do, which was marriage, family, and child counselor. And at the time, I didn't know whether I was going to stay in California or not, because I had, I had papers, I could stay there. I didn't have to come home. And I was uncertain about that. So I worked for the California license in marriage, family, and child counselling. So I got that. That took another year. And then in the meantime, I was, doing some dance therapy. And then I decided that I was going to come back to Ireland. And I came and looked for a job and found a temporary job in Oma as a creative arts therapist in a counselling centre there, the Tara Counselling Centre, for about 6 months. And so that was very interesting because it was quite soon after the Oma bombing. It was just the next year, 1999. So it was hard work, but it was good. And but then after that, I had, before I left California, I had been I finished my job in the psychiatric hospital, and I needed to earn some money. It wasn't so easy to pick up temporary dance therapy jobs. So I got a temporary physiotherapy job, or physical therapy as they call it there. And this was with children. And I had the job. I was so happy. I was like, I had suddenly landed on my feet, because I realized that I could bring a lot of my things together, a lot of my trainings together in working with children with disabilities. I could use physiotherapy, I could use dance therapy, and I could use the family stuff. So I was very delighted with that. So when I came back to Ireland, then when the job in Oma ended, a job came up as a pediatric physiotherapist in Donegal.
Oh, wow.
And I went for the interview, but I was really into dance therapy at the time. And I said to them, I don't want a physiotherapy job. I want a dance therapy job. And they laughed and said, oh, maybe you can do some dance, right? So then I was there for about, I suppose, maybe a year, 9 months or a year. And I did a little, I did a pilot study with teenagers who had cerebral palsy. I think I just took 3 girls and really worked with them with dance therapy to see how that was. And so that was very interesting. And actually one of them ended up going to dance classes after I'd finished, which was lovely.
Wonderful. That's amazing. Gosh.
Yeah. She ended up, she used to go to the dance classes with Echo Company in Derry for a number of years, and then unfortunately she died. So I did that, and then after a little while there in Letterkenny, maybe a year after that, they agreed that I could work more specifically using sort of dance therapy and really therapy with the children with the disabilities. And then I began to get referred those children particularly for that. And so that was lovely. And I did run a number of groups for adolescents with some of the other therapists. And so it was very nice. And I mean, I still continue to work, with the physio as well. So it was a mix.
It's lovely to integrate both fields. It's lovely to do that. Yeah. It's magic. Brilliant.
Yeah, it was very nice. I was really glad to have the opportunity. But as I continued, as I continued with that work, I realized that if I was going to keep working with children, I needed to know more. Because children are complex, and everybody is. But I felt there were elements that I didn't know or that I needed to find out more. So then I decided, I suppose, oh yeah, just to say that during this time, my creative aspect, I was involved with theatre group in Derry, and we would do improvisation. So I had been, that's always been a piece. So yeah, so I'm actually still involved with them. But so yeah, I'm going a bit off
No,
tangent
that's nice.
here.
So you're keeping in your creative flow as well outside of your working hours, and
Yes,
thinking about children and how there's still a little bit that's like I need to know more about, and wondering about
yes.
children, and they are so complex. There's just so much. Yeah.
There is so much, and it was just that I felt like I could get so far, and then I got a bit, the child wouldn't make any more progress, or I'd feel like, oh, wait a minute, there's something I don't understand. So I decided then, also, I just personally, I thought, oh, I'd like to be back down in Dublin. And so there was, I decided to do the child and adolescent psychoanalytic course in Trinity.
Yeah, it's a wonderful course.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, so
it's
I came down here and did that. And so that was another 3 4 years. And I worked, I did a little bit of dance therapy. I did a little bit of physiotherapy. A little bit, it wasn't really, it was more creative arts really. I worked in the schools, the way the school completion program used to have creative arts therapists. I don't know if they still do, but that was very nice. So that was an opportunity to do some work as I was in college.
lovely.
And
And
yeah,
yeah, like I've heard great things about that course, and yeah, 4 years as far as I know. It's lovely that you continue to grow and develop yourself and educate yourself, and really integrate all different fields into your work. It's
mm-hmm.
beautiful, and you haven't stopped. So I know there's another area that you're really passionate in now, and it's Kumyai. Am I saying
Oh
it
yes, yes.
right?
You're curious about that.
I,
Yes, yes.
I'm so fascinated to think that this is something that's out there that just, integrates both, the mind and the body, and and
Yes.
that I don't know, just the Eastern philosophy, and I'm really interested in that, and your work that you're doing, and how you
Right.
trained,
Yeah.
how did you start all that?
Okay, very good. Well, yes, Tibetan. It's called Tibetan relaxation. Really, it's not actually yoga. I mean, because sometimes when you say to yoga, well, they expect salute to the sun and all of those things, which is a very particular form. And although Kumye is movement, it's not those movements. So it's just different. Maybe like Qigong. I haven't actually done Qigong, but I imagine it might be similar. In any case, yes, it's Tibetan relaxation. But when they say relaxation, they mean waking up.
Oh,
Which is so that can be confusing because when we think relaxation, we think, oh,
going to sleep.
hey,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it means at least waking up your attention and your consciousness, right? So yeah, Kumye, it was brought to the US in the late 60s by a lama called Tartung Tulku. He's still alive. And it's been developed by a man called Arno Maitland, and he's a pupil of Tartan Tulku's, and I've studied with him.
Oh my goodness.
Uh, yeah, so for the last 10 years. So he yeah, so what would you like to know about Kumye? Basically, yes, okay. Kumye really works to integrate body and mind. And I think personally, I found it very helpful. And that's, I suppose, really why I'm doing it. I still do it and practice it myself. Um, I found that it really brings you into your body. and it really helps to get out of your head. So it's, and it doesn't mean that we forget the head, but it really connects body and mind in a very embodied kind of a way, so there's a lot of detail, there's a lot of steps so that you can feel it, so it's not just saying, okay, just feel your toes, you can do that too, but it's a little more complex than that. So that's and it works with the energy system. It's basically the energy system of the body. So when it says the body, it really means the energy body, but we use the physical body to access the energy body. And the energy body is that part of us that leaves when we die.
Yeah.
It's the us in there, if you like.
I completely. And for me, energies is everything. You meet someone for the first time, you pick up on their energy. It is exactly that exchange, and then we can have energy blocks as well, which is really interesting. And thinking about chakras, is that the word that's used, or is it not that word? Like,
no, it is that word. Yeah, no, absolutely, that word. And those are energy centers in the body, and all of those systems recognize the same chakra. They may call them different names, but they're pretty much, they may talk about 4 main ones or 7 or whatever, but those are those systems exactly. And and so it works to free up the energy in the chakras, but it works initially very much physically, because we hold tension in our bodies. And so it works to loosen that tension, not just for the sake of loosening it, but to open up the body so you have access to more energy and more understanding. So
that's really the awakening part then, isn't it? Like,
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's come. And it's a lovely movement form.
To come from the real physicality of the body in a physiotherapist to how the body moves in the dance movement, and applying the mind into that and the thoughts, and then to move into this is just magic to see how you've grown in that way, and to come into the energies, then the real core of us all. Really beautiful, like just like to hear that journey. It's really lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's interesting because people are different. Some people have to spend, have to go through all those steps, and other people might just touch one step and land in the energy body. You know what I mean? So people and like, so it's not that people have to think, oh, I have to do that first, and then I need to do that, and then people are different, and so it really speaks to some people quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, everybody's journey is going to be different. And I totally tiptoed around my journey and found, my way to art therapy, like the long way, but it was my way. Yeah.
I'm curious, was that being an artist first, or?
No, not at all. No, I, would have maybe done art like at home as a hobby, not at all. It was always for myself. So, but yeah, like just coming across it in different aspects of my life. I see more of it being when one door closed, another one opened kind of way. Not necessarily me thinking about an end result. It was always just, oh, here we are. Another door opens.
It sounds like you were following a flow.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And I think I still am, and just fascinated by, everybody's story and how they got to where they are. I think it's really important, and I'm really so grateful that there's an opportunity to share it as well. Yeah, it's
I think it's lovely. I think it's lovely that you're doing this, and you're right. Story is important. It's it's everybody's story.
and you know, we've kind of come through a very unusual time as well, with the coronavirus and it being a worldwide pandemic. And I really think now is the time for story more than ever. There's
Yes.
so much healing in it. So, if we spread our healing, I really think that it can help, even just like that, somebody listening and saying, oh, come yay, that sounds fascinating. I might go into that world. It's just having that reach and that scope right now. I think it's going to be helpful.
Yes, no, I think so, and yes, and I think you're right. In this pandemic time, it's important to find things that feed us in different ways, and story feeds in one way and movements feeds in another, and they're not separate because they can be connected.
Yeah,
And yeah,
absolutely. And you talked about your improv and how you're still connected with Derry, the improv.
yes.
And it's great to have that practice for yourself, like to not forget that creativity lies in you, and to keep it flowing. It's lovely.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think it's important. It's important to do that because, because otherwise you can, yeah, to keep it, to keep it flowing. Exactly. I can imagine with yourself, also with the art. I see something behind you there. Nice.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah, I think that's it has to be alive because it needs to be alive when you're with somebody. You need to be able to be in the moment, I suppose, really, as well as knowing, what the condition is or what the situation is, and as best you can, but you need to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so grateful to have you on, Fran. It's been so gorgeous to talk to you. If people were to look you up online, would they Google your name, or maybe go on the ICAT website to find you?
Yeah, probably they could Google my name, but I think they'd probably be better off to go on the ICAT website, so they could find that as well
Super.
for
That's
more information. And I'm very happy to take, phone calls, emails, or whatever. So
lovely. Yeah, it's great to get in touch. That's brilliant. Thank
yeah.
you so much. That's been great.
Thank you very much, Vicky. I really appreciate that. That was delightful. I enjoyed talking with you and meeting with you. Sorry, this life story is a little checkered, but I think the reason I want to put it in there is because I'm hoping to do maybe some groups with artists or with people not necessarily, whatever, different artists around creative process. And she really worked with creative process. So anyway, I just thought I'd maybe slot it in. Basically, Anna Halpern, she's still alive. She was 100 last week. She is a dancer who was very innovative in dance in the 60s in San Francisco. They were the first people who did nude performances and stuff like that throughout Europe and God knows what. Anyway, I think they called themselves the San Francisco Dancers Workshop. But in the 70s, she got cancer, and she discovered her cancer by doing a drawing. She'd done a life drawing of herself, and in the pelvis she had a big black area, and so she investigated that in her movement, but then she very quickly went to see the doctor and discovered that she did have cancer. So she developed work around healing after that, and then she had an operation on the cancer. I mean, it wasn't, she needed that as well. So she worked in that way, but basically she worked with what she called the life art process. So it was a combination of drawing and then moving the drawing and then drawing again. And this is something that many people, probably yourself, do. Many people do now, but at that point, she was one of the first people to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
And then in the 1980s, the late 1980s, she was one of the first people to work with people who were HIV positive at a time when nobody would touch anybody who was HIV positive.
Yeah.
She had an assistant who was HIV positive, and they would run groups to, healing groups for men.
That is absolutely beautiful.
And have performances and everything like that. So she's a very innovative dancer and woman. So anyway, I don't know, it may not fit in there. I just suddenly thought about it.
Yeah, no, it should. It's just so fascinating. We were talking about how women were, the unconscious of society. Basically, we were there doing the work.
Yes.
No one really, dug us out and let us speak. So the work was there in the mental health, and to see that, that the people that really suffered in the 80s, people with diagnosis of AIDS, HIV positive, to think that they had some healing, it's really beautiful. Yeah. And that she's 100, like, congratulations and happy birthday, Anna.
Happy birthday, Anna. She's an amazing woman.
Wow.
And actually, that's what actually got me to California in the first instance. I went to study with her. Wow. So that was what got me there in the first instance. So, yeah, so that maybe can slot it in there.
Totally can. Yeah. Thank you.